Hey, good morning, everybody. All right. Welcome back. Yay, hearts. So I I've been watching all of the chats. I don't know if you all know that I can actually spy on your chats. Well, at least your group chats anyway. And it's wonderful to see all of you continuing to work. Yes, new glasses. Thank you. These are my old man glasses. I can now they're just for computers. Um, they're it's like retro, right? It's like 70s modern for those of you that grew up in the 70s, early 80s. Yes. They're coming back in style. But I've been watching what you're all doing, and I'm very proud of everyone who's continuing to do this course. Like it's a huge undertaking. And we had a meeting last week, maybe sometime last week, where Geshe Michael was wondering how many people are actually following the rules, right? And the rules meaning like for the policies that he set out to the order of courses, basically how many people are actually doing the 18 courses first and completing them, and then how many, then he wants us to do an analysis of all the people that are taking the current Diamond Way courses and find out, have they finished the original 18 courses? Exactly, spying, yes. And he just wants to get like sort of a number to see like who's following the actual policies. And I was thinking about all of you and how proud I am of this group, right? Of all the people who are finishing these courses and doing it properly and taking your time. We have this idea that we have to get somewhere. I have to have more teachings. I have to have more. I have to have this teaching. I have to have that teaching. If I don't have it, then I won't be a successful person, right? And I think there's a power to thinking about the higher goals. And I think it's, having that total wish to become someone who can actually help people. We're going to learn about that this weekend. Um, we're going to be talking about what makes for a Buddha, and we're going to be talking about what qualities do they have, and how do we prove, like, these two classes are about how do we prove using logic so that we could have a direct perception that there are Buddhas at all, like that you could become a Buddha, right? Like that's the hope, that's the wish, that's the goal, that we could become someone who can actually help, right? And in the meantime, we try to help as best as we can, of course. But how do we prove it? How do we prove it even exists? Like, we've talked about it. We've talked about it a lot. But how do we prove to ourselves, right? Because if you can't prove it to yourself, you're not going to do it. That was a nice sound effect. Perfect timing, you know. And so you know, I think we're doing this the right way. We're just taking our time, right? We don't have time, but we do have time. And I think one of the values of this review course, whether you're brand new or whether you've been at this for 5, 6, 7 years, is that we take our time to understand the foundational teachings. We take our time to understand, well, what is it that we're really working with? Because time and time again, we will come back to them.
Recording in progress.
It's not like you leave anything behind. You just augment, right? And so, you know, don't think you don't have something because you don't have, I have a couple of people that are constantly whining to me that I'm not giving them Diamond Way. And I'm like, I'm giving it to you. Just freaking relax. You're not paying attention. Just relax. Because if you're focused on some self-existent teaching that's out there, then you've misunderstood the teaching, right? There is no Tantra out there. There is no Diamond Way out there on its own, by itself, from its own side. Okay, I'll give you a sadhana. Great. But there's no Diamond Way in the sadhana. Like, the words aren't it. Someone could read it and they could just be like, oh, that's the dumbest thing in the world. Someone else could read it and be like, all they do is they see holy beings in those words. I'm reading a really cool book right now. It's called, one of my friends is doing her PhD in paranormal experiences in religious groups and understanding how people in spiritual groups, like how those communities form. And there's a whole book on Buddhist paranormal activity, like the experiences that people can have, that they empirically talk about, right? But you can't prove to anybody. Like, did that really happen to you? Like, the closer you get to a teacher and you do it properly, and you do your basics, your Lombrim basics, like your three principal paths, cool things can start happening. Like all of a sudden, your teacher starts reading your mind, right? All of a sudden, like you're sitting there and they'll just say something, they'll answer the question that you had in meditation that you never asked. Or you had a question that you asked somebody else and that they answered, right? You start, these things can start happening to people, right? Can I prove to you that my teacher did X, Y, and Z? Directly. I can tell you a story, right? I can tell you the cool things that have happened and I can point that way, but I can't prove it to you. And that's why we don't talk about realizations very much. Like, I can't tell you what I've seen. Even if I told you what I've seen, could you believe it? Right? Would you know for sure? And how do you measure? Like, how do you even begin to think about, well, how do I think about what that person just told me? Are there rules? Are there ways that I can do that? Right? Like, that's why we do ACI 4. That's why we start ACI 4. Because ACI 4 is all about, how do we know something exists? How do we know something is what it appears to be? What does it mean to have something that's deceptive? What does it mean to have something that's ultimate? How do we interpret what somebody says to us? How do we interpret what a teacher says? You know, I've been accused of being contradictory, and I'm like, good. That means A, you're listening in some capacity. But in another capacity, like you have to evaluate, are the teachings internally consistent? Right? You have to make that decision. I can't make that decision for you. The path that you choose, which will be coming from your seeds anyway, will have to be based on how you treated others in the past. And you always have to add that little bit in there. It's not just your seeds, but it's the seeds that you have based on how you treated others in the past. You know, is that path internally consistent? You know, did the Buddha say something that seemed like a contradiction, but maybe it's not? Maybe there was a different purpose for what they said. Maybe there was a different intent. Maybe there was some compelling need to say something in a way that seems different or seems like, ooh, well, why did they say that? And this all kind of boils down to like coming to a funnel, right? Like your access, how do I say this? Generally, just generally, whomever your teacher is, your access or teachers, you can have more than one teacher and it's totally fine because they will teach you different things at different times. So relax. Your teachers, okay, become your access to Buddhas because they teach you how to have those experiences yourself. First, you meet them, then they teach you how to become like them. And that's the essence of Diamond Way. That your own personal, there's a great song by Depeche Mode for those of you who are old enough called Personal Jesus, right? Like your own personal Buddha, okay, will come, right? When you have the seeds for them to come, right? And normally they probably will come in the form of multiple forms when you need them. They might come in the form of, your scriptural teachers, right? The person who teaches you. All right, good, Alona. Young people still going to Depeche Mode. That makes me happy. They might come in the form of your partner. They will begin to, your world would begin to shift in incredible ways. And then you might start seeing them in lots of different places, right? Different people, and so they come to you and then they try to teach you how to become like them. But you have to have the skills in place to be able to evaluate what you're seeing. What am I really seeing here? What am I really seeing? Right? And so it becomes this, the power of ACI 4 is to start developing that capacity, to develop that mental clarity, clear thinking. So when these experiences start happening to you, you know how to evaluate them. You know how to go, okay, well, why does that person just appear like a normal barista to everybody else. But every time I look at them, I'm like, you know, who are you? Like, you always say that you say the weirdest things to me. By the way, their name is Ruby. Okay. Happens to be the color of Vajrayini. Okay. I'm like, that's weird. You know, is it a coincidence? Oh, it's just a coincidence that Ruby works at the cafe that I go to. It's just a coincidence, Tim. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, maybe. But maybe with different seeds, it could mean something different, you see. But it's how do you evaluate it? And how do you evaluate the world that appears to you, including the world that your teacher appears to you in? The way that your teacher appears to you in whatever ways is only based on what?
How we treat others.
How you have already treated others, not how you treat others today, how you have already treated others. Okay. So your world is just a reflection of the past. That's all that it is. The way you see yourself is a reflection of the past. The way your traumas, your protective selves, all the things that you do to navigate your world are coming from how you treated others in the past. No other, like, it's just a mirror of that. Right. So then the question becomes, how do you then step into something different? Like, I mean, even something silly, like not silly, but like I had a lunch with a friend yesterday and we were kind of connecting and talking about our difficulties. And she looked at me and she said, "You were my meditation today. Don't worry, it wasn't creepy." I'm like, well, whatever, fine. Right. And I said, why? And she said, because when I was doing the preliminaries, I was rejoicing in you. And I said, oh, well, what do you mean? And she said, I was just rejoicing and know how many people you're teaching. I was like, oh, that's nice. and then and then she was like, no, you don't. She was like, she's one of my good friends. She's like, you don't get it. I'm like, what do you mean I don't get it? And she said, you're just not rejoicing enough. That's your problem. You don't have real problems right now. You're just not rejoicing enough. You're focusing on the wrong thing. I was like, you know, thank you. Right. You know, she's a really good friend. We actually, we dated for a while many years ago for like 6 months or something like that. Right. You know, but I was like, oh, okay. So what did I do? I was like, all right, well, I'm going to listen to the secret message that came to me at lunch. Right. And I went to bed and I was like, well, let's just rejoice in it. Like we have 221 people here. We have like 800 people signed up for the course. Like that's a lot of people, right? You know, and I fell asleep right away. Like literally, I don't think I spent more than 3 minutes laying down. And I woke up in the middle of the night, which is a normal habit that I have. Like, and instead of entertaining the thought, like, oh my God, I got to get up in 4 hours and teach and get all worried about it, I was like, oh, I'm going to go teach these 200 or so people. And I fell right back asleep. And I woke up this morning and I was like, God, you're such an idiot, Tim. Like, but that's what the teachings do. It like remind you, it kind of like if your karma is there, it'll interrupt your negative thoughts and say, well, you know, it'll come through a friend. But you have to be prepared to be able to make those changes and to see that and to see where the teachings are coming from. Maybe your teacher isn't sitting next to you. Your teacher is sitting next to you if you have the right seeds for it. I don't get to be close to my teacher. Yeah, you just don't have the karma to see it. Because in the past, you divided people, you pushed people away, whatever, fine, who cares? That's today. That was yesterday. Today, I'm going to make different choices. Right? And then stop doing the thing. Stop doing the thing that creates the thing. That's all. Much easier said. I'm just like, oh, that's all. Just stop. Like I could just leave right now. I just told you the truth to the world. Right? But we have to hear it over and over and over again. Right? You have to keep telling ourselves it, right? You have to, it's like, as I said, like I was whining about my stuff, and my friend was like, my friend didn't say you're an idiot. And of course, I have a karma to call myself an idiot too. I could just be like, oh, yeah, you're right. Shift, right? But then I go into self-blame, and then I go into self-judgment. Do you all do that too? Right? But that's coming from a past karma as well. You blamed other people. You blamed other people for the bad stuff around you. Okay, that's fine. Like, what are you going to judge yourself? Are you going to judge your prior karma, which is probably billions of years in the making? Like, who was that person a billion years ago? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. And then how do you know you even had a billion years ago? That's the other point of ACI for. Like who were you a billion years ago? How do I even know I have past karma? How can Tim, you or whomever, how can you say, if you say to yourself, what's happening is coming from a seed planted by how somebody in my karmic stream, my mind stream, treated others in the past. Okay. A lot of the things that could be happening to you right now are not even related to the person you have been your entire life. Right? That's what Tim says. But do you believe it? Do I believe it? Could you have access to remembering? Could you remember those things? Could you actually have access to that? Maybe. You can. But I think the idea is like, well, you probably should prove it to yourself. You need to have that conviction, because if you're just listening to Tim or all the other great teachers in ACI, and then you're like, well, I just believe them because I think they're cool people. Like, okay, you can believe people from good. Like, start with belief. Good. They look like cool people. They got their shit together mostly from time to time. But at a certain point, like for you to stay on the path and to stay motivated, you have to prove it to yourself, right? To do all the practices, to keep going when when your world is like the ups and downs. We have the ups and downs. Like, Aryas still have ups and downs. You've heard Geshe-la talk about it, right? It's not like the bad seeds stop. You just do different. The more advanced you get, you just do different things with the bad seeds. Like, how to deal with it better. And the part of it is learning how to deal with it. And then all the stuff that comes up around it. Like, and that's why we need, like, really, like, okay, I'm going to go on a different trip right now. That's why we need community. That's why we need each other, right? And because life will be life. Like part of being born as a human has certain kinds of, you know, let's say there's a certain bank vault of karmas that are available when you're a human versus when you're a dog or a cat. And those experiences tend to be very similar. Suffering can be very similar, right? And so we get on this path and we expect that our suffering is going to stop. Unrealistically. That's a nice picture, Evgeny. If you're ever wondering, like if you need a picture, remember anything I say, Evgeny tends to put really great pictures in the chat. like he's already becoming a good teacher. But how do you face those normal ups and downs? Like when Geshe Michael, one of my teachers, went to the doctor and he's talking about his kidney transplant. Sorry, that's where I just recalled a dream last night where I had a major surgery in the dream. I'm sorry. Um, and basically he was talking to the doctor about it and he was just enjoying himself. And at the end of the discussion, the doctor was like, "Let me ask you a question." It's like, "I guess so." And she said, "Do you meditate?" And he was like, "What?" And she said, "No one has ever come in here so calm, so relaxed about having their body ripped open, and possibly you could die during the surgery." And you're just like, "Yeah, okay." Like, all right, that's the next day, you know. It's amazing to watch what he does with his suffering, what he does with his body. So part of our path is learning how do we navigate our own ups and downs, right? Because we each have a unique flavor, we each have a unique physical configuration, each of us has a unique psychological configuration, you know. And so have to learn about yourself. Like what brings you up in mood? What brings you down in mood? What triggers you? What types of people do you blame for your problems? Like, how do you react to all of those things? What are the patterns of it? Look for patterns, right? Look for the patterns, and then you start slowly chipping away at them. Sometimes you can do it faster than others. When you have the seeds for it, like you could spend if you have the right seeds for it, you don't have to spend 5, 6, 10, 20 years in therapy. You can utilize those structures very quickly, you know, or it might take longer. Maybe there's some deeper things to work through. It's okay. You're okay. And I want to like get people to start. This is where I'm getting to them for myself is you're okay. Like I think so many people believe that they're not doing the right things. Things aren't changing fast enough. There's too much war. There's too much this, there's too much that. There's the struggles of life. Like the promise of seeds haven't come true yet. Well, actually, they all are coming true right now, unfortunately. But what do we do with difficult situations? Like you know, I'm watching things happen in my own country that I'm like, what? Like, oh, my cat's puking over there. Isn't that cute? Just purifying. But I'm watching these things and I'm like, why am I seeing this? Like, why do I have to see this? Why do I have to see, you know, people killed on the streets? Like, what? That doesn't feel like my home, right? That doesn't feel safe. Like, okay, well, what do I do? You know, why do I have the seeds to see that? Why do I see some people celebrate it and other people find it horrific? Like, what do you do? Like, what do you do with that? What do you do if you're living in a country that's under war right now? And some of you are, right? What do you do? The larger world is, yes, part of your karmic condition. Oh, how do we face all of that? And ACI 4 teaches you how to face it, like how to think about it. Like, how do you come at things with compassion? Like, how do you come at things with wisdom when they're coming at you in the most horrific of ways? It's not a quick fix, unfortunately. But you will be challenged. You will be challenged, I promise you. On this path, you will be challenged. You will be challenged to look at who you think you are and who you think you could become. And who do you choose to be in the face of all of that? I had a conversation with a student recently about, like, Tim, why don't you talk about politics? And I'm like, oh, tell me more. Right. And I really thought about it. I was like, well, why don't I? And I'm like, I'm informed. I know what's going on. And I think part of it is the volatility of politics is like, what normally happens in the United States, you have 4 years of a president you like, and that 4 or 8 years, and then you have 4 or 8 years of a president you don't like. And then you have teams. Like, one side is on one side of the fence and another group of people is on the other side of the fence. And they're both arguing with each other. Some days your team is like in power, and some days your team is not. So therefore you should hate the other team, right? Watch what you do when your team is in power, and watch what you when the other team is in power. How do you respond? How do you pay attention? I by the way, I do not tolerate atrocities. Okay. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, if you have a world that's built on teams, that my side versus their side, how do you, if you start treating the other side in a certain way, then you're just creating more sides. And the most famous example of that is football. Today is the Super Bowl, the United States American Football Championship, right? Which team are you going to root for? My team. And I hope the other team loses. Okay, good job. Your team wins, the other team loses. Everyone celebrates on your side. Everyone like goes home sad on the other side. It's the dumbest thing ever. Now, I love sports because I love the competition. I love watching people excel. Like when I go to sporting events, I just look at people doing good things, you know. You see what happens? Like this is why I don't talk about politics, right? Because then it's like then we have certain kinds of like discussions and then one person goes this way, one person goes this way. And then it's like, okay, but you see, like I want to build a world community. Okay. Like ACI is a place for everybody, regardless of your politics. Okay. Because if you're behaving morally and ethically, it doesn't matter what team you play for. Maybe there's secret agents in the party that you don't like that are helping them be better people. I don't know. I don't know. Right? It's difficult. It's difficult. I understand. It's extremely difficult. It's difficult to be like exactly Shanti, right? Like if you're, like how does one see things in a certain way? How do you see it in a different way? It all comes down to emptiness. It comes down to what world do you want to see, right? And I'm not saying don't stand up to things that you don't agree with. If people are doing bad things, find ways to like stop it. Okay. But understand that the underlying ways that your mind creates reality will change your world. If you change your karma, your world will just change and it can change overnight. And like you'll start seeing it on very, very small levels. And then we're going to get to the content. Okay. So recently I've been having kind of unearthing some emotions that have just been stuck in my body. Like I just know that they've been there and realizing how much this unresolved, it was like a darkness. I didn't know what it was, but this unresolved thing in me. And I was watching myself out of that darkness was causing certain kinds of behaviors, repetitive behaviors that were causing my world to be in a certain way. And I knew there was an essence to it, but I didn't know what it was. And I had this unreasonable reaction to something completely normal. My roommate, who's been here for about 4 or 5 months, told me that he was moving out. He was going to move in with his girlfriend. And I was like, oh, that's great. Wonderful. Like, happy for you guys. They got a house down the street. You know them, Kendall and Shane. They're moving down the street. Like, lovely couple. We sit here often at this table. We play board games. We have dinners. It's lovely. Right? But after like, I was like, oh, that's great. And we stopped the conversation and I went onto my couch where I read and study and things. And I got really upset, really, really upset. And I was like, I was like, why am I so upset right now? Like sad, like I felt betrayed. I felt abandoned. And I'm like, this is a completely unreasonable reaction to this person leaving your house, right? Completely 100% unreasonable. But I was having this full reaction to it. I'm like, what is this about? And I was like, all right, that's the content for therapy this week, right? So when I went in, I have my therapist. Her name is Annie. She's wonderful. I was like, we're going to talk about this, right? And so I started talking about it, and she started asking questions, and within about 5 minutes, she was able to unlock what it was. And I got incredibly this upset just came out in this like authentic way. And I just she said, just go, just feel everything. So I was just feeling everything. And when it passed, which by the way, if you feel an emotion for approximately 1.5 minutes completely, it does move through your nervous system, just a FYI. And she said, well, how do you feel now? And I said, what was interesting is I felt like I was 4 years old. And I had this thing that happened to me when I was 4 years old. I was playing in the outback in the sandbox. Okay. Interpreter, sandbox is the play, like we built like an area where we put sand in it, and then you build sand castles in it, like that you would build if you were on the beach, but we didn't live on the beach. Okay. That's what we do in America. We just ship sand somewhere and you make a place for kids to play. So I'm sitting in the sandbox, and I don't know whatever happened. You're 4 years old. I started crying. Mom didn't come out. I cried some more. Mom didn't come out. I don't know how long it lasted. It probably was only 2 minutes, but in kid world, it was forever. Okay. And then I cried some more. And then I cried so much because no one was coming out. I peed my pants. 4 years old, right? So now I'm crying that I peed my pants, right? And I'm just crying, right? And eventually my neighbor comes out. I didn't want to see my neighbor. I wanted my mom, right? But somehow in that moment, my psychology kind of clicked, and it was like, oh, I can't rely upon my parents to support me emotionally. This is the little kid mind. So I was like, I have to take care of myself, right? I have to be responsible for myself. Okay. This is not a psychology class. All right. But what happened was, because I connected to this past karma and I kind of purified it, like I actually felt that emotion as that 4-year-old finally. Right. Guess what happened right afterwards? I was talking to my mom. And for the first time ever in my life that I can remember, my mom asked me about how I was. She asked me, are you happy? And I was like, what? And I was happy. Okay. I was happy that I was actually not happy in the moment, but I was happy that she asked me. Right. All of a sudden, now my whole relationship with my mother has changed because of this event that happened when I was 4 years old. What was mom doing when I was peeing my pants in the sandbox? I had a little brother who was 2 years old at that time, a year and a half. He probably was, my brother was a terror as a child. Like, my brother would put his hand in his diaper and he would like smear the poop all over the wall. Okay. For all of you who are parents, you know what this is like. Okay. My mom was probably cleaning up something that my brother did. Right. But somehow, like, these things happen to us, and then we make decisions about them unconsciously. Right. And so I've lived. And so when certain things happen, I feel abandoned. I feel neglected. I feel left alone. My roommate left and I felt abandoned. He wasn't abandoning me. Come on. Like, that's ridiculous. But you see, if you can shift that one little karma, you can shift a relationship. So what I'm trying to say to you you can shift things really quickly if you have the tools, and the tools are coming in this class. And so the first thing we need to learn about is what makes for a perception. Okay, this is what ACI 4 is all about. What makes for any kind of perception? Right? And does anyone remember what the Tibetan word for an accurate perception is? Okay, why am I having problems with this? I upgraded my computer.
Sema.
That's Sema, yes. And something weird has happened. I'm having a difficulty sharing my screen. Hold on. Because it hides this. There you are. Except I want you to be in this mode. There we go. Nope. That's not it. Hold on. Sorry, I changed some settings on my computer, and I've been having a very difficult time sharing things. I'm going to have to turn this off. What is this called? Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. All right. We'll call this a sema, right? The Tibetan word for sema. What's the word in Sanskrit?
Pranama.
Nope. Pronounce it correctly.
Pranama.
Nope.
Pranama.
Sema.
Pranama. Pranama.
Nope.
Second.
Pramana.
Praman. Yes. Sorry, I changed.
No, it's a pramana, right? A sema pramana. Okay. And what we're talking about, how can you figure out what is a correct perception? What is a valid perception? Okay. Key word. We're going to go through this for the rest. No, we're not there yet. Don't answer questions I didn't ask yet. We're going to be going through what this means in this entire course. But we have to understand how do we perceive something? Okay, that's the question. How do we perceive? All right. Like, how is it possible that I could perceive things in one way, and how could you have a totally different view of it? If you've ever had a partner, it is a perfect view of this. We had the same conversation yesterday. I remember it this way. You remember it that way. If you've ever had that discussion with your partner, you're in the right place, or with your boss, or with your teacher, or with anybody. Okay. So how do we know? So the question becomes, how do we know if something exists? That's the question of ACI 4. Okay. By the way, if you have not taken ACI 4 and this is your first time, just relax. This is going to be a bomb of information. All right. And that's why we have the review groups. And if you need more time with it, please spend time with this course, because this will start shaping your mind in a way that allows it to clearly think through just about any situation. Like, so that when you have an unreasonable reaction to something, like your roommate leaving, maybe you can turn it into an opportunity to purify an old seed from when you were 4 years old, and then repair your relationship with your mother. Right. And it could be bigger than that, not just, but your parents tend to be good karmic objects. So what we want to figure out is, how do we define something that exists? Like, what exists and what doesn't exist? And in this presentation, like that which can be perceived by a valid perception is the definition of existence. Seme mikva yupe seni. All right. Sema, seme, mikpe, yupe. That which can be perceived, an object of a valid perception, is the definition seni. Okay. For those of you studying Tibetan. So how do we define what exists? You know, like what doesn't exist? So something that can be perceived by a valid perception. We'll decide what a valid perception is in a minute. We have to do a lot of definitions, but anything that can be perceived by a valid perception, which in this school is basically a fresh, unmistaken perception. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. All right. But there's something that we need to address. And so, and this is going to be like a primer on the second school. Okay, basically this course comes from in Buddhist philosophy, there's 4 primary schools and they build upon each other. Okay, you have the Abhidharma school, you have the Sutrist school, you have the mind-only school. By the way, Sutrist is also called logic, clear thinking. Then you have Madhyamika, which then gets split into lower and higher. So really it's kind of 5, 4.5, depends how you want to do it. Okay. So this class primarily comes from the second school, the Sutra school, the logic school. And there's some definitions in there that once you move to the higher schools change. Okay. So let's take a hot second here to think about this. So each of the schools build upon each other and they give you a different view on things. They give you more tools. And if you think about them, I like to think about them like a study of mathematics. Like you first start with addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Then you move into fractions. Then you move into negative numbers. You know, then you move into maybe algebra. Then you move into geometry. Then you move into calculus and then differential equations. You know, it gets more and more advanced as you move along. But you can't possibly understand calculus without understanding the foundations, right? And so the Buddha taught 4 different schools that in some ways they're not 100% accurate, but they help you get to a place where you can understand the full view. Right? So we're going to be in the second school, and not everything we say here is 100% correct. But, however, it helps you tremendously. And the second school has incredible tools like clear thinking, like logic, like chittadrak, for example, quality and characteristic, which can help push you into seeing emptiness directly. So we have to define what is it that we see. And so the second school says, well, anything that you can see from a valid perception, perceive by a valid perception, counts as existence. It exists for them. Okay. Now, I would say there's a distinction between a correct perception and a valid perception. Okay. And we're going to kind of unpack it a little bit, but just in case you don't come back. All right. Unless you have seen emptiness directly, you've never had a correct perception in your life. Meaning that you haven't seen how something became something, how something came into existence for you. Okay. Like, how does this, how is there a cup here? Right? Like, this cup is here because I have a seed opening in my mind based on how I've treated others in the past. And then a luminous image opens up in my mind and it goes over and goes, oh, this is a cup. But you didn't see it that way. I can say the words. I mean, I don't know who you are. Maybe you do see it that way. But you just opened your eyes and you saw a cup on the screen. You see a cup on the table. You go, oh, there's a cup there. Right. Right. And until you see a seed opening in your mind directly, you're not having a correct perception. You're already wrong. Okay. However, put that idea aside for now. Okay. Because we need to start from the wrong to get to the right. We need to start with where you are, right? You open your eyes, you go, good morning, world. And like, okay, well, what's in my world today? I got some cups. I got some puking cats. I have a sunrise. I have a couch. I got glasses. I got clothes, right? All the things in the world. I have my emotions. I have my newsreel, right? All of the things that are appearing in my world today, right? All of those things are there, right? How are they there validly? Well, according to Buddhism, according to the second school, when you open your eyes, there they are. I see a cup, therefore a cup exists. Period. Okay. I see a cup, no problem. That's the world we're starting with. And then we start breaking it down. Right. And I'm trying to do this in a way that can help you as teachers in the future. Because how would you teach this to somebody? Like, how do you teach someone who's seen everything, a sortong, someone who sees everything coming at them, which is probably most of us, maybe, and have them go from this to this, right? Like, how do you get people to flip their view, right? And then to have the wisdom to flip that view on everything, not just some things, but everything. Up into the point of themselves, me. I got me today. I'm a valid experience. I got Tim. Who do you have? I got Marcus has Marcus. Katya has Katya, right? Who are you? Who do you think you are? Just flip this view from this way to this way about you. Because until you can believe or validly establish that you are coming this way, you can't change. You cannot become a Buddha until you recognize that the me that you thought was there is not the me that's there. The me that is there is arising out of is being perceived as a luminous image coming out of seeds based on how you treated other people in the past. I gave time for the interpreters. Yes, and I'm also annoyingly fabulous today. Okay. when you can make that shift about yourself. Like, that's when you can start changing yourself. Like, change your inner world, change your outer world. Okay. So there's one important concept that comes out of this course. A famous quote by the Buddha. Don't forget it. Don't ever forget it. Some of you forget it all the time. I, or someone like myself, meaning this is the Buddha speaking, not Tim. This is the Buddha speaking. I, or someone like myself, can judge another person, but no normal person should judge another, for they will fall. Okay. And I have this picture here of judgment, right? You have a guy who's a judge, and then if you judge people, you fall into the lower realms, something like that. But what does this mean? Is that unless you're a being who has the ability to understand the subtle workings of karma, the hidden aspects of karma, and what that allows you to do is to understand why someone is experiencing something that they're experiencing right now. You must not judge another person because you have no idea. You have no clue. Even the person that appears to be doing the worst thing in the world, you have no idea. Okay. That doesn't mean that you don't act in accordance with the world that's appearing to you. Okay. But but the way this plays out on a microcosm, right? I'm not talking about big stuff. Like, I'm talking about small stuff. And what usually happens in spiritual communities is that people start judging each other. I'm a better practitioner than you. I'm keeping my vows better than you. I can't believe you did that. Like, that person isn't as good of a person as I am. Or you get a group of people and like start like poking at the community. Like, that person over there, you know, they're not as good. They seem to be not as solid a practitioner. They're not as kind, right? They're not as, evolved. You may not say those words, but we do it as humans. We're constantly judging other people. We're constantly evaluating other people's behavior. And let me tell you, like, I had a beautiful insight this weekend on in the Pratimoksha vows, um in the full monk's vows. There's a whole section on how you take care of the community and how the community takes care of each other when someone is maybe misbehaving in a certain way. And there's all these different ways that if you don't do it in a kind way, if you don't do it in a gentle way, it even uses the word gentle, like gentle speech, you end up breaking a vow. It's not a full vow, but I mean, you don't lose your vows, but it's called a remainder. Like, you still have the vow left a little bit if you do it. But it just opened my mind to, how should we treat each other? How should we use gentle words? How should we approach each other when maybe someone's not behaving in the best way? How do we help them? How do we help them understand that maybe their behavior is hurting others? Look, don't be the karma police at the same time. Like, you don't have to like everybody. Humans don't have to like everybody, but treat everyone with respect, especially in a community of people that are trying to change the world. Okay. The captions were just turned off, so you might want to turn them back on again because I know the translators use them. Um, we're going to have our differences with each other, guaranteed. Normal human communities will have differences with each other. We will like some, we will be neutral to some others, and we would just not like some people. It just happens in all groups. Sorry. you know, it's just normal. And then you become friendly with some people, and then like one of my good friends, we joke constantly. Like we have this like East Coast of the United States thing going on. Like the other day in class, we just looked at each other. We both knew exactly what the other person was thinking, you know, and it's fun and it's great to have connections with others. Nice, Evgeny, karma police, right? But like we have to be very, very careful how we treat each other, especially the people that we disagree with, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing, right? And maybe the people we disagree with actually might become our best friends when we really understand each other. That's been my experience. The people I disagree with the most, we tend to disagree with each other because we're very similar, you know. But you don't know what someone else's practice is. You don't know what the right practice is. You don't know what school they're operating in. You don't know what what's the word I'm looking for? Guidance they were given by their own teacher. I've received horrendous criticisms from people about the way that I'm running ACI. And I was just like I'm running it based on how my teacher has guided me to run it. Okay. You know, and maybe they guided me in a certain way so I could purify certain kinds of seeds and have certain kinds of conflicts. Teachers are they only care about you reaching the highest goals. Sometimes they will put you in the face of conflict like you can't even predict, you know. So, but you have no idea. Like that person may have been told by the same teacher that the teacher was criticizing what I was doing, even though they told me to do it. And both are valid, both are correct. And you have to develop that kind of sensitivity. And it's not a contradiction. You know, but don't be the only karma you have to worry about is your own at the end of the day. It doesn't mean don't stand up for what might be right, but how you stand up for what's right, it also identifies the kind of karmas that you want to place in the future. Like if you end up being wrong in the future about something, how do you want people to treat you? And that's how you need to think when you're helping somebody else that you disagree with. How do you want to be treated when someone disagrees with you? How do you treat your own seeds? How do you treat others? Because they're, in a way, a reflection of you. So you can't judge others at all. So, And it's very difficult to stop. I get it. Don't worry. It's difficult. So this is really the main point to walk away with. You don't know what's going on in someone else's world. It's like judge the action, but don't judge the actor. If someone's doing something bad, okay, well then how would you want to be treated if you were doing something wrong? And then consider your next steps very carefully. Because if everyone if the world thought this way, it'd be a very different place. Very different place. And you can just meditate on that. Those are beautiful meditations to engage in. What would the world be like? Okay, going back to valid perceptions. So we're trying to actually see things. The whole point of this course is to learn how to see things that we can't see with our eyes. Can we learn to see things and prove that things exist that we can't see directly with our own eyes? That's the whole point. Because if I say to you, nirvana exists, a place where you no longer have any negative emotions. If I tell you that omniscience exists, if I tell you yeah, for example, those two things, those are states of mind. How can we prove that they exist? Really? Really, it's something we can't see. So the whole point of this course is how can we prove to ourselves using airtight reasoning that something could exist, that we could have a direct perception of it? Could we have a direct perception of ourself being an arhat, or direct perception of ourself being a Buddha, which is a hidden thing for most of us, if you are who you look like you are, and I have no idea who you are. Maybe you are already just Buddhas hanging out on Zoom so Tim can finally figure this out. It's been a long time coming, guys. Thank you. I'll get it eventually, and you can just go celebrate in your Buddha paradise. All right. So what are we trying to prove? So first of all, is there's things like Tokyo, Nungyur, things that are obvious, evident, right? Like this painting on this picture, right? Things that are obvious, like the cup, right? So to humans, this is an obvious thing. It's a cup. Now there's other things that are not so obvious, which are hidden, right? And we've used this example before, like if I'm holding a pen and I put it behind my back, right? You can't see that the pen is behind my back, but you use a different kind of perception that tells you that the pen is behind my back. Okay. So there's two types of perceptions. There's direct perceptions, things that you can perceive that are used to perceive evident objects, like your eyes looking at a cup, your ears hearing the person on Zoom who turns on their microphone when they're in the bathroom rather than leaving it off. Okay. The smell of your favorite perfume, right? The taste of your delicious breakfast you're going to have in 10 minutes. Okay. Right? The things you can perceive directly. And then the things that you perceive that are hidden, kokir, Like you have to use jepaksema, you have to use deductive, indirect perception. If I put a pen behind my back, like in this picture, oh, okay, that's a hidden, that's, I can't see the pen anymore, but I know the pen is in that person's hand because I didn't hear it fall to the floor. Right? You're using logic, you're using jepaksema, using deductive reasoning. And that's what we're really going to be paying more attention to is deductive reasoning, because it'll help us question the things that we thought that were evident that may not be so evident. And then there's a reality that we really want to get to, which is called deeply hidden reality. And this is kind of a picture from, I kind of imagine this from the movie Interstellar, right? Where the guy goes into the Tesseract and is like, can see all moments past, present, and future of his life. Right. Like understand, like something that's deeply hidden would be like the subtle workings of karma, for example. Like, and really only Buddhas can see that. But one of the first things we need to understand is that the difference between obvious, evident Nungyur objects and hidden objects is not always self-existent. Okay. Because something that is evident to you might be hidden to somebody else. Like simply, right? This cup is evidence, is obvious to you, right? All of us see this obviously. What if a blind person walks in the room? Is it an evident, obvious thing to a blind person? No, it's a hidden reality. They can't perceive a cup. Now, they might be able to hear water pouring into an object and they'll be like, oh, could I get a cup of water too? Right. But they're deducing that there's a cup there. They're not perceiving it directly. Okay. And this gets you to an easy way of understanding, like what's obvious to you may not be obvious to somebody else. And as a teacher, that's where you have to like start. Yeah, Anastasia, that's correct. Jepak Sama. Um, what's obvious to one person will not be obvious to somebody else. Your reality is obvious to you, but it's not obvious to everybody else. Just have a partner and you will learn this very fast. Like, what? You can't understand why I'm upset about this? You can't understand why this irritates me? Of course. No, I have no idea why that irritates you, honey. Can you explain it to me? If I have to explain it to you, then you don't understand me. How am I supposed to understand you unless you tell me what, like, these are standard arguments, right? Everybody's reality is very different. Okay. But we're trying to find things that are hidden that we don't know that are hidden. Excuse me. We're trying to establish things that are there that we can't perceive directly. Right. So, how are we going to get there? And so, what we're trying to establish is this transformation, how to go from the person on the left to becoming a Buddha on the right. Okay. And there's a lot in this picture that you can kind of figure out. But how do we make that transformation? Right. And so Master Dignaga in his book, the opening lines of the text that we're studying, Semir Girpa Drola Penpa Drola Penshempa, Tumpa Desha Kebla Chaksalo. I bow down to the protector, the one who's gone to bliss, the teacher, the one whose wish is to benefit all living beings, and the one who turned correct. Now, I just said it a little bit differently than what's written here. Okay. But the one who turned correct, the one who helps all beings, the teacher, the one who went to bliss, and the protector. Right? There's a whole section on how all of these fit together. But the first thing we need to look at is the one who turned correct, the one who is a sema, the being who is an accurate perception. Okay, a being of accurate perception. It's a really cool statement. And what does it mean to be a being of a person of valid perception? Right? And that's meaning a Buddha. An enlightened being is a person of valid perception. They only have valid perceptions. They're the only one who's actually having valid perceptions. There's nothing mistaken about what they see. They see all existing things, past, present, and future. They cannot lie. Oh, but the Buddha will test you along the way. The Buddha will say things to you to test you, to push you. The Buddha taught 4 different schools. They weren't all correct, but they're helpful. So if they're helpful, is it a lie? And you have to look, you have to think about that one. Okay. Right. The Buddha taught 3.5 schools that were wrong. So if a Buddha is a being who cannot lie, how did a Buddha teach 3.5 schools that are wrong? Right? Got to think about it. And it's not a contradiction. Tracy's like, I can see Tracy there. Like, yes. I'm just looking at all your beautiful faces right now. So what are some qualities that a Buddha has? And we just talked about it, but we're going to go through it again. All right. We call them a semekebu. You can get this PowerPoint later. So first quality that a Buddha has is that they see the totality of everything. They see all existing things. They understand all existing things. Right? So a Buddha has the capacity to see past, present, and future. And they can see all existing objects, which is it's a really big thing. Everything that belongs to the normal world. Okay. And then secondly, they can see things exactly as they are. Okay. And I like this picture, like in their bare nakedness, the bare nakedness of emptiness, right? They see how things really are. They understand how things become the way that they are. right? They see they understand how your world became your world. All existing things are all the things that you perceive, but all the things that a cockroach perceives, all things that a hungry ghost perceives, all things that a semi-god perceives. Okay. But they understand perfectly where it comes from. And it comes from emptiness. It's bare, naked truth. Okay. And then thirdly, as I said, they can see all things past, present, and future, all existing things at the same time. So when a Buddha is looking at you, they're not looking at you today. They're looking at you before and after, which is a really weird contradiction of terms if you think about it. But you have to think about it. But they can see all existing things, past, present, and future. This opens up a whole can of worms of debates. You can have them yourself. And I'm not going to do it right now. You can think about it. Okay. So the question becomes, we'll pause after this, is that us normal people, okay, how do we evaluate what a Buddha says? You know, how do we determine what is correct? Okay, and the Buddha taught us how to evaluate anything that someone says to you. Okay. And so here's the three tests. The first test is the teachings cannot be disproved by any direct valid perception we have had. Okay. So your direct perceptions have to align with the teachings. Okay. And if they don't, then something wrong with the teachings. Okay. But then you have to be very careful about how you judge that. Understanding that your perceptions, what you're having a perception of is also coming from the seeds out of which a luminous image is coming, which is also then dependent upon how you treated others in the past. Right. So you have to understand why you're seeing something. And maybe this is why the Buddha taught 4.5 schools. All right. But it should align with your reality. If it doesn't align with your reality, there's something wrong with the teaching. All right. Secondly, is that it needs airtight reasoning, like meaning that the teachings cannot be disproved by airtight reasoning. And this picture is about, I said airtight. I couldn't figure out a good picture for airtight, but AI helped me. Like they're in a vacuum, right? And they're in an airtight suit, right? They can breathe, meaning the logic is perfect, right? If you can find a logical way to disprove the teachings, you should do so, and you should try. But most of the time, your logic will not be airtight anyway. And then the third one is the teachings should be free of internal inconsistencies. That should not contradict itself. So I have this picture of what might look like an inconsistency. Once you understand it, unknots itself. Okay. The teaching should be free of internal inconsistencies. Oh, good job, guy. Right? So it's your job to take the teachings and to apply 3 tests to them. Apply the test of, does it align with your reality? Okay. And you have to take some time to evaluate it. You have to think about it clearly, like logic. Is it airtight? Is it reasoned well? Okay. And thirdly, is it free of internal inconsistencies? Right. And you have to do all that work yourself. Okay. But basically, the Buddha said, don't believe what I have to say, prove it yourself. Because if I'll say to you, if you can prove it to yourself, then you will do it. If you can't prove it to yourself, then you won't do it. Right? And then you'll just stay in suffering. So don't worry about it. I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying find the right thing for yourself. And I'll help, and I will try to help you find the thing that's right for you. Tartuk take my chick. What does that mean? Tartuk take my chick. Nope. Tartuk does mean rejoice, but not in this context. All paths lead to the same ultimate place. Right? Find the path that works for you. All paths go there. It is a vow in Diamond Way to not disparage other people's paths because Tartu take my chick, because all paths go to the same goal. And when you understand that very, very well and very, very accurately, it changes how you interact with people. And it all starts with ACI 4. So if you want Diamond Way, you're getting it right now. And I just proved it to you. I just showed you. How about that? Okay. Don't think that this isn't that way. This is how you need to start shifting your mind. This is not anything else but that. This is how you transform things. And there's steps to get there. And that's what this course is about. All right, so let's take a half-hour break. We almost finished class 1. I'll finish class 1 and then barrel through class 2 because I don't stop talking. But I think it's, as I've always said, I think it's more important to take our time rather than rush. Because it takes time to integrate all of this, really. So take a half-hour break. Have a nice breakfast, lunch, or dinner, depending on what time zone you're in. Don't eat too much so you can not fall asleep in the class. And we'll see you in about a half hour.